And we're recording.
Thank you. Okay, this is a unit on the buzz on pollination, and I have several people here that have kind of helped me develop this unit, and you're going to be hearing a little bit from each of them as we go through. But in this unit, students learn about the importance of pollination and how different birds and insects and animals play an essential role in ensuring the future of our food and plants and flowers that we have. And by exploring how pollination works and what types of flower pollinators prefer, students can begin making decisions that will improve the environment and help maintain the populations of the pollinators for years to come. And through this, the National Inventors Hall of Fame has many resources and lesson plans for teachers to use in their classroom. And one of the aspects in their educational program is the design thinking program. And if you joined in or listened to the recording from yesterday's session, Sean did an excellent job explaining about the design thinking process that they use. Sean, do you want to just kind of briefly touch about that?
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. So our Camp Invention is our flagship summer day camp. And throughout that program, students engage in the design thinking process, which is the foundation of part of what we do in invention education. And as hands-on educators, the design thinking process is probably familiar. But with the National Inventors Hall of Fame and Camp Invention, we do add to it. And you'll see here, identify, explore, sketch are all familiar. But then with invention education, we add prototyping, which is creating a three-dimensional solution to a challenge. And I know Tracy has some other ways that it might not, we'll use prototype in air quotes, that her students have solved challenges. And then we get into some intellectual property through protection as part of the process, and then pitch. So having students really share with their peers their solutions, and maybe it's something that they want to market, again, in air quotes. So that really is the Camp Invention design thinking process.
And using this in your classroom really helps students to see the workforce aspect of what they're learning, as well as the ethic side of things that happen in the classroom and outside the classroom. So it helps to prepare them for those STEM careers. Miss Blanton, you can wave. And we joined together and were kind of challenged from our librarian, Miss Bakamo, you can wave, to develop a garden in the planter that's in front of the library. The plants were dying, and it looked horrible. Nobody was keeping it up, and so I teach an energy and environment class, and so Ms. Bakamo had come and asked about if we were interested in doing something. And so there are a lot of aspects in getting a garden ready to be planted. And so I went to Ms. Blanton and kind of said, I kind of need some help with some of the math parts of it. And she was like, yeah, sure. So we just kind of joined together. We knew that this planter it had to have plants that could survive in full sun because there's no shade, and that we wanted plants that would live all year because we didn't want to replant every year. First of all, expense. Second of all, just the time. And then we have been studying about the decline of the pollinators in our world and in the United States. And so we decided that we wanted plants that would attract pollinators. And so through that, the students and us came up with this problem of how can we build and design a garden to attract pollinators. And so we have lots of aspects here of trying to answer this question and to develop and build things that will help with this. Crystal, do you want to say anything, or Emily, before I move slides? No? Okay. So, anytime that I have an idea or something that I think my kids will enjoy doing, I always go to our famous librarian, Miss Buckamo. We're so fortunate to have her. She actually was a science and math teacher before she became a librarian. So with that background, she is extremely helpful in finding lots of resources and things for us to use in our classroom to help enhance the learning that our students have. So Emily, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Gee, thanks. I always laugh when Tracy introduced me as the math and science librarian, because that is definitely not the norm in library world to have a math and science background, but I did teach math and science. So anytime I'm working with Tracy, and a lot of people just don't really understand how much librarians really want to help anytime you're doing some sort of project like this. We've kind of got the stigmatism that we are the keeper of the books and we're not just there for checking out books. And I'm a huge advocate for that. And people who work with me at Lugoff Middle will tell you that I'm a huge advocate for somebody with that. So with Tracy, and specifically with this project, I did a lot with just helping her with the planning and the preparation of it. I helped her find the resources through Clemson Extension, because I was like, "Whoa, those will be good people to go to for finding our plants and how to lay out our plants." And plus, I had to make a little secret plug that, you know, that's my alma mater, so I had to go back and pull my Clemson roots back in. When her class got ready to start doing the research, that's obviously the most traditional part for a librarian to come in. I helped her find the resources, both print resources, digital resources, and really got the kids thinking about where they were finding their resources from, because our students really just like to do a Google search and find their information, and really stress with them about using databases, especially since South Carolina State Library provides a wealth of databases that are all free for us to use. So really pushing them towards information and resources like that. We talk a lot about citing information, and even down to citing images that they use to create presentations. And we talk a lot about copyright and creative licenses. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, so I don't want to steal too much thunder. A lot of the resources that I use for like my presentations and my specific lessons in our collaboration, I get off of copyrightandcreativity.org. I mentioned that last night. There's great information on copyright rules and creative licenses for all of the grade levels, middle, high, and elementary. And I also get some of my materials off of commonsensemedia.org. And I can put both of those links in the chat, because I was smart this time and I copied them into my notes so that I would have them. Tracy, I know I'm leaving stuff out, because you know how I am. I get started and give me some things that I may have missed.
Well, like the co-teaching, she's come in and worked in the classroom with me on, you know, with the copyright, with the research, working with the students, kind of teaching me as well, along with the students in a lot of this. So I mean, if you have a good STEM program, you're going to be really good friends with your librarian, because she is going to help and direct you. And she does a lot of back background research and then comes and tells me about it, and says, oh, you need to look at this or you need to read this. So, you know, your librarian is your best friend, and you should use your librarian as a good resource in any classroom, but in STEM especially. She's taught me how to use Canva, and she's taught me how to use Breakoutedu and different online tools like that. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But
I know, like, the biggest thing as far as reaching out to your librarian, part of our job as a librarian is for you to come to us with an idea, and then we can go find the resources that you could use with it. So if in some aspects we make planning a unit or planning a new unit from almost scratch, we do a lot of the base work for you, or can do a lot of the base work for you without, because we know where to go to find the good, credible information without having to sit down and explain to you what's the good, credible information and where you should go and where you shouldn't go. And I know that at least all of the librarians that I know would be more than happy to work with anybody that would approach them about it. I think we just have sometimes a negative image that all we want to do is sit in the library and check out books and read, and that's not the case.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as part of our research on the pollinators and plants, we also researched inventors, such as Lorenzo Langstroth and researchers in Japan who successfully used a tiny drone to pollinate flowers. I think it's important for students to research and to see the history of topics that we're studying, and innovations such as the beehive that Mr. Langstroth did in 1851. And a little trivia, I didn't realize this until I was doing a little bit more research on him. He received a patent for his design in 1852, but it was ignored, and he never received royalties for it, which I thought was very interesting. And Sean kind of touched on that yesterday in her session about the patents, and sometimes it doesn't go all the way through. But his invention is still used today. So it's important for us to expose students to how innovations from the past are still being used today, and how innovations and new technologies today are being used, such as drones being used as pollinators. And we'll kind of look at that in a little bit. Sean, do you want to say something else real quick? Because on their website, on the National Inventors Hall of Fame, I think it's what is it?
Invent.org, and I'll
yes.
put the database in there as well. But no, you're doing a great job. I think this is
they have a lot of inventors in the Inventors Hall of Fame that you can look at, that you can incorporate and implement into your curriculum of what you're teaching. Within this, one of the resources that Emily found was Jackie Jordan from Clemson University, and she, you can see her email down there, through Zoom, she talked to us a little bit about our planner and some plants for South Carolina, for our region, our zone, and what kind of plants would be useful for us to use. So just reaching out to different universities, different extensions and stuff, you can find some excellent resources that can help you plan things in your classroom. And our next one is actually online here. Miss Cruz, she came into our classroom and worked with our students and helped them on a chart fill out plants that we would need to plant in our planner. She had several choices, and then the students would kind of choose based on her information. I'm going to let her talk to you a little bit more about what she does, and I'm going to stop sharing so you can share, Miss Cruz.
Hello. Had to find my face again after we stopped sharing. So I work very closely with Clemson Extension. We actually are in the same office building, but our program is separate from Extension actually. And the Nature as Teacher program focuses specifically on integrating nature themes into whatever school topic you have. So today we're talking about STEM. We also do a lot of art and history. So whatever you're teaching, whatever you're doing, if you're tired of doing it inside your classroom and you'd rather do it in the schoolyard, or you'd rather have a field trip, or you just want to have a new spin on it, our job is to go ahead and offer that nature lens. And you'd be really surprised about how we can integrate nature into pretty much any topic, even math, even performance arts. So we have a lot of resources to share with you. And I think one of the really cool things is that when Tracy came and she said, this is our project, I have the time, that's a really important resource. I have the time and other resources to go ahead and kind of cater exactly the project to what she needed. So we came up with the chart specifically for your planter and having your goals being met. And then we talked to the students about, you know, what are your specific goals, and tried to help coach them through the information and really identifying what they would want to put in their planner and what works there. And what we focused on, obviously, with your planter is they wanted to attract the native pollinators. So we talked a lot about how do we attract native pollinators by putting native plants. And we talked about, you know, what it means to be native and what it might mean to be alien or invasive. So it was a really fun project. And I really love working with classroom teachers because I was a classroom teacher. And I know that anytime that you can kind of take a teeny itty bitty bit of a break and have someone else plan the lesson, come in, you know, make a mess, clean it up, and then leave it, you know, I love to just be able to offer those extra resources. So I can share my screen here. This presentation I can, offer to you so that you can really go through it slowly if you want to. I'm trying to, there's a video here, but I don't really think that, yeah, here we go. So there's that 5-minute video that kind of gives the background of the preserve and how it got donated and all of that. But I think for your purposes today, it's just a little bit more relevant to go over the kind of resources that we offer. So our mission is to provide outdoor education experiences by facilitating and supporting our nature-focused programs and practices. We have 3 goals, and there's, like I said, so many different things that fall under these goals. And if you're really, really interested to see exactly like our instructional practices and teaching philosophies, you can follow that link there. And like I said, I'll send this presentation to Tracy so you guys can look over it more if you want to. And we strive really hard to be integrative and interdisciplinary. So we're not only practicing those hard skills like math, science, reading, and writing, but also our soft skills like teamwork, creativity, and your sensory engagement. And then as we're developing a program for whatever you might be doing in your classroom, working really hard in those interdisciplinary spaces. So when we're exploring ecology, we can kind of separate out, like right now we're focusing on math, but that's very related to the science that we're going to be doing and really related to maybe this art that we're doing to help share our ideas. And again, if you want to see some examples, I have some examples linked here for you so you can do some deeper exploration. We offer tons of different programs. So we do outreach programs like out in the library, out in the school, like when we came out and worked on the planner. If you're having some kind of expo, we also do those table activities and community programs. We're out in the parks all summer long and do summer camps and after school programs. And then community workshops. So if you have like a more adult group, like a book club or yoga club, we also can come out and collaborate with you on that. And so these are just the different ways that we can offer resources. So if you're focusing on a specific skill or ability level, a specific subject like pollinating gardens, or if you have a certain state standard that you're working to fulfill, we can go ahead and collaborate with you on that. And so that can look like I'm giving you the tools and the resources, or we can co-collaborate, like co-teach, or I can come out and completely facilitate the lesson, or some of my coworkers could as well. And then we also offer field trips. I know with COVID right now, it's been a little bit crazy. We haven't been doing field trips as much, but we are a field trip destination. So if there's ever a field trip that you want to plan, we are here for that. And we're right close by, just right across the river. And then if you wanted to look at some of these materials as well, I did last year, and this May coming up, we do Soil Circus actually right there in the middle school. So we bring a lot of tools in and do a lot of soil science with, I believe it's the 7th grade. And so here's my contact information if you have any further questions or want to reach out. I love working on projects like this, like I said, and it's been always a joy to work with Kershaw County School Districts. That's a picture of our preserve.
Thank you. That was very informative. We appreciate that very much. I'll go back and share my screen again. She is very helpful, a very good resource, so reach out to her. Okay, so this is an example of the chart that she was referring to that she helped us. This is just part of it. We went in and had, with the help of Ms. Bacamo, went in and researched about the mature width and height and the suggested spacing for the plants. And they wanted to know about the colors because they want to try to make the garden a lot more with our school colors, which are blue and yellow. And so they were, we're kind of working on that to try to space them out. Crystal, can you think of anything else for this one? We use this for our scale drawing that we're going to look at soon.
Right. We use this mostly to, we had a ton of plants. Ms. Cruz gave us a ton of plants to choose from, and we were able to allow the children to have a lot of deep discussion about exactly what they wanted and why they wanted it that way. So I would say, if I was guessing, we started with a list of maybe 30 to 35 different plants that we could narrow down as a class and talk about why we were getting rid of it or why we thought that it was really important. I actually remember us doing class votes as we went through and talked about the ones that we wanted. We told them we were trying to keep it somewhere between 10 and 15. So we were at least trying to cut it in half and even try to go a little bit smaller than half. That way we didn't overpower or underpower our space out there. So the kids were really good about helping us decide and just letting them decide really what they wanted and why they wanted it. We talked back and forth with Ms. Cruz a couple of times about different plants that they were choosing and whether we thought it was good or bad, or maybe the placement, whether it needed to be towards the center or towards the edge. And this chart was a good beginning spot for us to start having get our minds rolling on what we needed to do and where we needed to put it.
Exactly, yes. And we also had them research about the cost of the plants because we have to figure that out as well to buy them. We haven't bought them yet.
And I know we also had them really think about the growing periods too, and when things would be blooming, so that we would have some color in there throughout the year, at least some greenery. So I know that was a big part of the discussion also.
Yes, Ms. Bacamo, thank you. See, it takes lots of people together. When they completed the chart and decided on the plants, then we got them on Canva, and which is a wonderful site that Ms. Bacamo showed me, that you can create so many things, but the students created these little place cards to put into our planners to identify the plants once we get them planted. And we talked about the scientific name and how it was written and why they have the scientific name. And then they wrote just a short description about the plants and just kind of decorated it. And these are some of our websites that some of the resources and stuff that we used within these research aspects that we've been talking about. And through the research, my students found this graph, and they wanted me to put this in there because they thought it was pretty cool to see how the decline over the past 67 years has happened. And it really, they were really interested in like the causes and the impacts and the solutions for the decline in the bee population, or even just in the pollinators. And so they really liked this graph a lot. I'm not quite sure why it struck to them, but it did. This was one I referred to in the beginning about the drone pollination, which is taking that new technology, that new innovation, and creating drones to help pollinate plants. Since we have this decline in pollinators because of insecticides and deforestation and things like that, and just building cities, they have designed these to move over the plants and to pollinate. They can cross-pollinate, they can pollinate the same. If it becomes bad weather, then the drone is programmed just to head back to the quote-unquote drone hive, which is pretty cool. And the students really enjoyed learning about this because we have drones, not drone pollinators, but we have drones in the classroom, and so they've used them. And so to see different uses of the drones besides just flying in the air and, you know, filming things or taking pictures, they thought this was pretty cool. So I believe in literacy involved in any STEM lesson. I believe that it's important for the students to have you read to them as well as they read. And this is a very simple book, The Honeybee and the Robber by Eric Carle. It's known as a picture book, but we're in the multi-purpose room in this picture because we're fixing to do a game that I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes. And before we did that, I read this story to them of how who's stealing the honey from the hives. But there are a lot of books out there that deal with pollination. I think it's important for them to have the literacy aspect just so they can see, they can link the language part of it with the math part, with the science part, and build to solve real world problems. They can analyze data from this. They can write argumented paragraphs. Some other books that the students used were What If There Were No Bees by Suzanne Slade, or What is Pollination by Bobby Kalman. Those are good books dealing with what we're talking about in our classroom. Emily, do you want to share? Because you help me with books all the time. Okay. Another thing that Ms. Bakamo has taught me is about Breakoutedu, which is a great gaming site for kids to explore new information, to explore or to review information. This one is actually for elementary, but it covers what we're talking about. It covers the what plants need in order to grow, and it covers what pollinators help the plants to pollinate. Talking about insects and birds and bees and butterflies and furry animals, squirrels and dogs and cats. So it brings all that in for the students to see. So it's just a fun way for them to kind of review some facts. This is the game that this is how things kind of started with the Buzz on the Pollination game from the Inventors, the National Inventors Hall of Fame. It was through their blog that I saw this, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And of course, I went to Emily, and I was sharing with her about the game, and she has library helpers. And so I asked if I brought some construction paper, and I said, could they please cut out some flowers for me? And so they cut the flowers for me and got them laminated and all that. And we went to play in the multipurpose room. And so what they did with this was they in my classroom before we went to play the game, I had them crumple up yellow pieces of paper, and I had them use some Scotch tape just to help kind of hold them together a little bit more. And so those were our pollen grains. And I just kind of threw the flowers out on the floor, and they would measure the mass. I wanted them to measure the mass of their pollen grains because there were different size pollen grains that they created. And then they had to throw them, toss them, and they were measuring how close the pollen grain was to the flower. And if it was 15 centimeters, 0 to 15 centimeters, then we could say they pollinated their flower. If it was 16 or more, then their flower was not pollinated. So we got the math skills in with measuring the mass. We got the measurement skills in, measuring in centimeters and meters, as well as just learning about pollination. From this is Miss Bakamo's suggestion. She said, what if you added wind? So I brought the fans out. And so after they did their trials without the wind, we added the wind in there to see if the disbursement was different. And they measured their distance from the flowers as well. They loved this game. They thought this was the best thing ever. This is an example of their data tables. So this one on the left is the data without wind and then with the wind. And you can kind of see that the wind kind of dispersed the pollen grains at a farther distance than without the wind, which kind of showed to the students, and we had a discussion about how wind is a pollinator because it takes those seeds and spreads them out, and sometimes it can spread them farther than an animal or an insect can. So it was a great learning experience for them on pollination. Thanks for that game idea, Sean. And now we're going to look at how the real-world math applications have applied to this whole unit so far. So Crystal? Crystal is our math teacher at Lugoff-Elgin Middle School. She's an amazing teacher.
Thank you, Tracy. So I teach math intervention here at LEMS. So when Tracy came to me and she was like, during third period, we're doing this thing with Miss Bakamo, and we're going outside and we're getting dirty, and we're going to be able to use different kinds of tools, and the kids are going to be doing a lot of real world application. She had me. That's something especially that my students really need. Students that struggle in math, anytime that they can apply that in the real world, that helps them to make those connections that they need to feel successful, and to see why it is relevant, and why math is important. So with this project, the first thing that we did was we got the tools into their hands. You would be surprised. They're so used to looking at a ruler on a computer screen held up to a pencil, or a ruler on a computer screen asking them what the measurement is. When they actually get the ruler in their hand, they're like, what do I do with this? Like, how does this work? Where does it go? Like, which way do I turn it? So we got the kids, Tracy has meter sticks, and on one side it has, it's a meter stick, but on one side it does have the yards written on it and marked off. So we had a discussion about how the different measurements are, like why it's easier to measure in metric versus US customary, and why like that we're really the only one that really uses the US customary, and everybody else uses the metric system. That was good for the kids. We let them have some trial and error. We actually did measure the planter in US customary. We went that way instead of going metric. That way they could have more experience with that. We talked about using yards and converting those into feet. We noticed that as the students were measuring the planter, we were able to clear up some misconceptions that they had. one big thing that we noticed was if it went 6 yards and then some, they would say it was 7. Like, they wouldn't round it the whole number, they would still add the sum onto it. But if they had to move that meter stick a 7th time, instead of saying it was, let's say, 6.5 yards, they would say it was 7.5 because they moved the meter stick the 7th time. So we were able to help clear up some misconceptions there. The biggest part probably came with the scale drawings. We took them out there, they measured. Then the next class period, we came back in and we said, okay, can you put those huge measurements? I think that it was like 17 feet by 18 feet. Can you put 17 feet by 18 feet on this piece of graph paper we're about to give you? And they're like, no, that graph paper isn't even a foot on this side. We're like, you're right. So what do we need to do in order to get it to stay the same size? Because we can't plan on it if it's not the same size. It's got to be the exact same size, but a little different. And they're like, what do you mean a little different? Like, how do we do that? So we talked about how you use scale factors, which is a big math concept, in order to keep something the same shape, but just change its size. So we played around with some scale factors so that so we could plan where our plants would go, and it would be big enough for us to see that it would use the best amount of the paper that we had without hanging off of the edge anywhere. We talked about volume because once we got all the weeds and stuff, all the dead plants out of the planter, we were like, oh, this soil needs some help. And we talked with Miss Cruz about some things that we could use that our kids could get their hands in and use also. That would be a good nutrient base for our soil. And we ended up using mushroom compost, which we bought in bags at our local Lowe's. And we had to calculate how many bags we would need based upon the cubic volume that we wanted. And I think Ms. Cruz said, was it 2 inches we tried or half an inch? Do you remember, Tracy, what our calculation was for that?
I think that one was like a half inch, but the mulch or the pine straw was 3 inches, I think.
Okay, so we had all kinds of different calculations that we were trying to do to talk about, the surface that needed to be covered, how deep we needed it. And then, like you said, we talked about either doing mulch or pine straw, and we used calculations to see if we could afford to do that. We found out real quick that the mulch was way too expensive. We were not going to be able to get the right amount of mulch that we needed to fill in the planter, to plant around, to keep the water and to keep the planter moist for our plants. So we ultimately decided that pine straw was our way to go. It was a better, more cost-effective way to use our money. So the kids also had a really good time. Once we had our plants all decided, once we decided that and we voted on which plants we were going to use and we did our scale drawings, then we had the kids look up how much the plants cost and where we could possibly get plants for. They used unit rate because sometimes the plants or seeds, if you get so many seeds or so many plants, let's say you get a little pack of 6 plants and it was a certain price, and then another place had it where you're paying this much for 1 plant. We were asking them, which one's better, which one's more cost effective for what we're trying to do. So they really got down and they got deep with the math part of it. It's almost like you trick them into the math. They're like, oh, I'm not doing math. Oh, it's math. So they really enjoyed it. They really jumped in. Students that struggled with math that I have in here, they didn't complain. They weren't like, oh, this is too hard. They were really excited to join and to do something that they know that they're going to be able to see that over the year, it's been changing. It's making a difference. and that it's going to eventually be something beautiful within the next few years. Well, that's another discussion we had to talk about the measurement and how it's going to change over time. So we had to allot for measurement changes as things grow. So there was just a ton of places where math plugged in order to make this successful.
Yes, lots of places. Math is everywhere. So this is an example of our sketch that she was referring to of the planter. The outside perimeter was the 17 by 18, and then you can see our symbols for our plants and our placement for those plants. Crystal, do you want to say anything else about this part?
Just to see the kids' creativity here was huge. We pretty much just gave them the plants and said, put what you think needs to go where with these stipulations. Miss Cruz let us know, the taller plants have to go in the middle because it's a 360 view. If you put the tall plants on one side or along the edge, then you're not going to be able to see the other ones all the way around. That's mostly what we focused on. We had them convert their, back at the other chart, there were some that were in feet and some that were inches. We had them convert them all to the same kind of measurement. And then our scale factor here, we use 6 inches. So each square signifies 6 inches versus 1 foot. So the kids then, once they knew all the measurements in inches, they had to go back and apply what that would be scale drawing wise. So if it said that it was going to be, let's say 2 feet for the butterfly weed, right in the top right corner, top left corner, it's in both. They knew it was 2 feet, so that they were going to need to use 4 blocks. We told them to plan on us planting it smack in the middle, so make sure that they had enough area around it for that growth that's going to be happening. Because even when they see it at the beginning, yeah, it's going to look teeny tiny. It's going to look like we don't have enough plants in there. It's going to look bare, but things will grow. So you need to make sure you leave space in your scale drawing for that. And just the creativity that they had for this was really big.
Yes, exactly. And they were very excited about all this. Then we took them outside after we had all this done, and they started roping off where these plants would go, started measuring out and roping off the planter. So in this box is going to be a butterfly weed, and that's the area that it will have in order to grow. The little hexagons that we have down here, I meant to say in the very beginning, and I apologize for not saying that, but these are the design thinking process steps, I guess you could say, components, and so that's what those are. So what we were doing in our garden kind of led to a service learning at our school and in our community. This little girl right here, we, like Crystal said, we had calculated the cost of mulch, of how much mulch we needed, and we decided we couldn't afford it. It was way out of our budget. And so they remember outside of our schoolyard, there's some pine straw, and they were like, well, we could go break up the pine straw in the schoolyard. And I was like, okay, yeah, we could do that. Well, this little girl went home, and she had gone to her Nana's house, and she saw pine straw in her Nana's yard, and so she raked up the pine straw in her Nana's yard and brought the pine straw for us. So she did a service for her grandmother, but also for our school, which was amazing to see the empathy that came out through what we're doing in our classroom outside of those walls, and that the students are taking it beyond our classroom out into the community and showing the care that they have for each other as well as for the environment. This is a short little video clip of her talking about this, so I'm going to let you listen for just a second. Okay, I don't know why it's not playing.
You may need to optimize your sound when you share. There's a checkbox. You might have to stop share and share.
Okay. If it doesn't play, it will be okay. I kind of told you the story, but she is very cute and very sweet.
Oh,
Optimize, hold on. Back. Optimize video clip. I don't know. Oh. I don't know how to do it. We won't waste any more time. I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry. She's very cute about it. She was very excited. Maybe I'll get it to work in a few minutes. I don't want to waste too much time. She is a very sweet girl, very humble, and she actually brought us 4 bags of pine straw at different times. So she's still continuing on with her service. Okay, so my students, you know, we talked about pollinators and did all the research and all this work, and they wanted to create pollinators. So I was like, okay, that's cool. Let's do that. So this was like off the cuff student interest. They just kind of brought it up. So of course we did our sketch of the pollinator, and this is an example of one. You can kind of see where they wrote in a different color. Those were changes that they made, modifications that they did as they were starting to build their pollinator. And this is them constructing. Some students wanted to work in pairs and some wanted to work by themselves, and I just let them decide that. Lots of different materials, raw materials that we used, toilet paper, paper towel rolls, construction paper. I had some paint. I had some clay, just different things, cotton balls, whatever we could find. I happened to find some fluff, like you stuff a pillow, and they were very excited with the tree that I had found that. They thoroughly enjoyed making these and very proud of them. These are some examples of some final ones. This is a hummingbird, and then you have a butterfly, and then a fly, a moth. These are actually displayed in our library. That's one thing Ms. Bakamo loves, is for when students do different builds, different prototypes, different creative things. She loves for us to put them in the library for others to see. And the students enjoy seeing their work being displayed as well. This group was a very creative group of students that I had. They did some amazing things. I mean, this flower looks real to me. Emily, do you want to say anything?
You're going to steal my thunder. It's the next slide. Oh,
Okay.
you're on the next slide.
There you go.
So because the students were so proud of their work, this led us right into Creative Commons licenses and how they can license their artwork that they created for non-commercial use. So we talked a little bit about that led into why you have to cite images and things on presentation. So if you haven't been able to tell yet, everything just kind of all weaves together and all comes together. And so we had the students go on the Creative Commons site. They submitted the images of their prototypes that they created, and they have official Creative Commons licenses for their artwork that they created. So
yes. And you can see up there the hexagons with protect and with pitch, because they are protecting their creativity that they did, as well as they're sharing it with others in the media center as well as online. So Sean, do you want to say anything? Because you had some good stuff that you said yesterday about protect and pitch.
Just students understanding the value of their ideas And this really starts them on a pathway to understanding a little bit about intellectual property and that they can actually own their own ideas. So I'm super excited to see that this has been incorporated, and it's amazing. And it gives them pride and confidence, right, in creating in the future.
Yes, it does, because they realize this is mine. I did this, and it motivates them to want to do more as well. But they are very proud of their license.
that.
They're very proud of their prototypes. I also had them create using Canva again, which is kind of like graphic design in a way, but I had them create a Save the Pollinator campaign, which deals with pitch, where you're marketing and presenting what you've done. And we talked about images, and we talked about wording on there, of, you know, what to do, and that you want. We talked about on social media how you can scroll through things and things don't catch your eye and you just kind of keep scrolling, but you want something that somebody's going to stop and really look at, because you want to catch their attention to really voice how important it is for that we save the pollinators. This is just another example of using Canva and how they can create posters or social media posts or things like that. And Emily, with another unit that I've done through the National Inventors Hall of Fame, she helped me do a Twitter, not a Twitter, a TikTok for part of our pitch. So there's lots of ways that you can have students do this besides just Google Slides. Now we're going to get Christy, who's an amazing art teacher at my school, talk about the real world art applications.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so this unit is really awesome as far as incorporating tons of different art activities, and the arts can just really enhance any learning experience and give students a much better understanding on information and their information that they're learning, and actually get the hands-on that some of them really need to take in the information, unlike worksheets might give them. So part of I feel like they've already talked so much about all of the art steps they've taken, but they did incorporate tons of creations. And so they had creations where they drew out for the garden. They had creations where they had to draw out their plans for their pollinators, and creations where they actually had to build the pollinators. And taking these different steps does require a little bit different a little bit different learning experience for them, because a lot of times they're not used to being given the opportunity to take the creativity and run with it. And a lot of times I will see students that really struggle with coming up with ideas because they're just not used to being given that freedom. The other nice thing about them working through these creations is a lot of times when you make your plans, draw your plans out, and then you go to start actually creating it, you run into problems because things never quite go according to plan. And for students to actually have that experience of things not working and trying to figure out how to change it right then and there is a great learning experience for them. And it really helps them sort of learn that they can be flexible, things can be fluid, things can change. It doesn't always have to be set in stone. And I think that's another great thing that arts can bring to students, is to let them know that, hey, it's okay, you can keep going, you can fix it, you can find another solution to it. So that's a really great opportunity. And then, yeah, with having them do the Canva poster, the design, a great learning opportunity as far as talking about a career in arts, graphic design, which right now, you know, with all of our multimedia and internet and everything, it is a huge industry. And students knowing that that is something that they could be interested, something that they could take and actually do as a career is something important for them to know, because a lot of times if students like art, they don't know what to do with it, or people around them don't know what they can do with it. So getting those little nuggets of like, hey, you can actually design posters or design websites, that's a career, that's really important for them. And the same with planting the garden, coming up with all those math and details. That's a great landscape architecture. Landscape designers have to do everything that they did. So if they truly enjoyed that experience, they could be looking at a career in the art field. So a lot of those were just really good entryways and ways to incorporate the arts into it. And then the last one was the butterfly bowl. And this was going to be a water station that was going to help attract some of the pollinators. And Tracy had come to me to ask me to see if this was something that like my students could work on. And it could be something definitely that students could do on a smaller scale, but for what they needed, I just had a few students to sort of help me out and work with it, because it was a little bit tricky to do an actual bowl and have the mosaic tiles attached to that versus just doing like a flat stone. So I had, there was a few 6th grade girls that helped lay out the design of the bowl. And then I actually did the gluing for them, just make life easier and timing wise, because it turns out you have to glue each row and then tape them. So it really, the girls couldn't always be there when it would be time to glue it down. And one thing that I thought was fun was when we were talking about the colors for the bowls, we had sort of talked about, school colors, or, just the colors that they could find in the stones. And they had talked about really wanting to do like the warm colors. And I mentioned to them that I was pretty sure that butterflies were attracted to red. And so we were sort of wondering about that, and, look it up and you find out, yeah, butterflies and bees are attracted to basically warm colors. So anything that a flower would look like. So incorporating more reds, that sort of gave us more, okay, yeah, red and, yellows and oranges is definitely going to be something great to incorporate. So yeah, the bowl turned out, and I think back to that planning stage, one of the things that you have to realize is when they made their design, the end design was different than the beginning, and there was certain designs, areas that had to get changed based on when you start gluing, things maybe didn't fit quite as you expected. And so that was a great learning experience as well. So Tracy, how are you? We can't hear you, Tracy. You're still muted.
Thank you, Christy. I apologize.
That's fine.
I muted because the dog had barked. But no, you can see how Christy is amazing. And like she said, I went to her and said, we need this. Can you do this? And she's like, yeah, sure. So we have some wonderful teachers at Lugoff Middle that are very helpful. But I want my students to be able to reflect, to make observations on their garden that they've done, because this garden has been taking place this whole unit thing has kind of been an all year, hit or miss all year. We had our first 9-week students, our second 9-week students, third 9-week students, and fourth 9-week students. So it becomes more school-wide than just 2 small classes, which is amazing to see how they just kind of jump in and kind of continue with where we left off with the other group, and they're ready to go and excited about it. But I do want them to do like a quick write, a day in the life of a pollinator, through a journal, where they will make closer observations about what's going on in the garden. They'll be measuring the plants. They'll be looking at what pollinators are on which type of plants, what colors. Does this one prefer this color over this color? how many pollinators were in the garden at certain times, like putting times of day that they go out and observe, and just kind of make it kind of like an outdoor classroom where they can reflect on what they're doing. And then with all the hexagons, this is, there are lots of hexagons in nature. Sean, do you want to talk on this for a little bit?
Sean had to hop off actually, so she's going to leave it with you, but I will
Okay.
put a link in the chat that talks about this stuff too.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we're running over a little bit of time, but this is, there's lots of hexagons in nature, such as snowflakes, of course, the beehives, tortoise shells, the eyes of dragonflies, which is kind of cool to see hexagons in nature and how they're being used as support, as strength. Hexagons are the strongest shape in nature because they deal with triangles. And the Natural Inventors Hall of Fame use, in their gallery there, you can see the wall is of hexagons. And it's also seen in the design thinking process because together we can accomplish more and cover more than working by ourselves. And that's the point of the National Inventors Hall of Fame as well, with all the inventor inductees, that working together we can make life better and easier for everyone. These are a few of the resources that I used in order to create this unit. And then thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing.